Warm greetings to you, the members of the Bethesda Society, on this very solemn and significant Thursday called Maundy Thursday. I had so looked forward, following the invitation of your ministers, who are my colleagues and friends, Reverends Vilakati and Mkingi, to share in this Holy Week, Good Friday and Easter services with you. But alas, that was not to be, given the pandemic called COVID-19 and the consequential lockdown, which has now given rise to me meeting you instead in this way. Our gospel readings for today, which I have chosen, are found in John's Gospel, chapter 13, and selected verses 1 to 17, and then 31 to 35, and Luke's Gospel, chapter 22, verses 19 and 20. And I invite you to read those in your own time. Maundy Thursday, also known as Holy Thursday, is the Christian holy day following on the Thursday before Easter. Maundy comes from the Latin word mandatum, meaning mandate or commandment, reflecting Jesus' words as recorded in the Gospel reading in John. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. It is also the day which initiates the Easter Triduum, the period which commemorates the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus. The Triduum, meaning 3 days, includes Good Friday and Holy Saturday, and ends on the evening of Easter Sunday. This year, 2020, like no other year in our lives, we get not only to commemorate, but also to envision the events of the first Triduum differently than we had ever before. This year, the circumstances relating to COVID-19 shift our attention more closely to the events and message, moving from this night of betrayal, loneliness, and denial to the cross and resurrection. But unlike those who stood at the foot of the cross on that first Good Friday, we are not bewildered. We are not without hope, because we know that after the events of Good Friday, there is Easter. After this darkness, there is light. After this hopelessness, there is hope. After pain, there is redemption. Even though we do not know what the intentions of this coronavirus is and for how long it would carry out its mandate and leaving many suffering, diseased and dead, what we do know is that God has not checked out and left us alone or on our own devices. What we do know that is amidst the mandate of the coronavirus, we have a different mandate from God. We know that amid the lockdown and self-isolation and quarantine, we have and will be experiencing the newness of life, new births, new discoveries, new and different opportunities of selfless and incredible acts of kindness and love and service, just as that first Triduum did. Our reading in John's Gospel takes us to the night before the crucifixion, Maundy Thursday. Personally, as I looked and reread this text, I was captivated by the image of Jesus washing his disciples' feet, including one who would betray him and another who would deny him. The passage in John's Gospel is uniquely Johannine and is without extensive parallel in the synoptic Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Jesus' departure here acts as both the context and theme of the whole. The opening 3 sentences serves as a mini prologue outlining Jesus' destiny and the implications for his disciples. The setting is, of course, just before the Passover, and John brings to it the festal associations of Jesus as the new temple, the host at the table, the Lamb of God, and the true bread from heaven. In John's Gospel, this is not a Passover meal, as in the synoptics. The arrival of the hour, however, does signal the passion which John interprets as Jesus' return to the Father. The main thrust of the first sentence of this gospel reading is Jesus' love for his disciples, which is the motivation behind everything that is to follow in the second half. Jesus' love for his own extends to the end, not just in terms of time, till the end of his life, but also in his scope. His love for them is total, radical, and complete. Though the betrayer is in the midst, ironically, part of the intimate circle to which Jesus had turned, Jesus walks towards the passion in full knowledge of what the Father has given him. And it is in this context Jesus performs the foot washing, an act John outlines in careful, almost ritualized detail. Peter's forceful reaction is both typical of his impetuous character and also gives the opportunity for Jesus to outline its necessity. His brief answer outlines its primary meaning. Unless I watch you, you have no part in me. You see, in the ancient world, foot washing was done for reasons of hygiene and hospitality, generally by a slave or other socially inferior person. It was not exactly a glamorous job. To wash someone's feet was an act of hospitality and care. It was also an act of servitude and humility, but always to the honor and glory of the master. No wonder this was Peter's reaction. Not Jesus, not his master, not ever. Still, there was Jesus with his wash basin and towel. He knelt in front of them one by one and washed their feet, calluses and all. John ever draws out a further meaning. Not only is the foot washing a symbol of cleansing and union with Christ, it is also symbolic of the love within the believing community. This kind of love is the love that Jesus has demonstrated for his own and is to be the basis of Christian love. Christians are drawn into a community, not just with Jesus, but also with one another. This is then an important theme in the farewell discourse. Jesus will be present to his people in their self-giving love for and service of one another. So when he's done, he tells them why. He says, I am setting an example for you. You should also do what I have done to you. Go and do likewise. In John's reading, this is followed by his mandate to them in addition to what he has done. A new commandment, he says, I give unto you, is to love one another as I have loved you. Now, this narrative, of course, is a subversive one, in which in the concluding hours of his earthly ministry and in his final seminar, he brings to culmination what had been characteristic of his entire ministry. In this passage, we see the king becomes a servant, the Messiah becomes a subject, the master becomes a slave. In the other Gospels, especially in Luke's Gospel, the events of this night see Jesus also breaking bread and sharing wine with them. It tells us about his loneliness in Gethsemane, followed by his arrest and trial and subsequent crucifixion and death. And so on this night, filled with so much darkness, both literally and figuratively, in this night of betrayal and denial, in this night of loneliness, our call in the world, and especially this time in the history of our nation, as we are in lockdown and huddled in our own homes, no doubt filled with an anxiousness and fear, uncertain of our future, we are called, as Luke reminds us in his passage, to remember Jesus, and as John does, as the one who calls us to be servants and gives us a mandate to love each other just as he has loved us. We are on this night commissioned and mandated to be servants to the world on Christ's behalf and realizing that whatever we would do would be to the glory of God. So you will ask me then, in this very different Easter, how is it that we are going to be called to serve? How is it that we are being called to share God's love? What is it that we are called to remember? We must remember that our love this evening is one that follows Christ's love. And Christ's love is one that calls to sacrifice. Indeed, this Easter, we are called to a new kind of love, a sacrificial kind of love, one in which we would seek to sacrifice even ourselves and all that we hold so dear, such as fellowship, such as touch, such as being out in spaces where we are able to meet and be with each other. We are called to sacrifice that for the good of others by staying in the spaces that we are. This year we are called to love in a different way. Not in a selfish way, but in a way that seeks to love, and in that love, by withholding myself so that you may know life. Because there is a danger of death, a danger of disease, if we were to be in each other's presence. So our love is called by sacrificing our presence with each other. This year, we are also called to servanthood in a different way. Not by washing each other's feet, but by ensuring that we wash our own hands. Not washing our hands off each other, but washing our hands in order to offer life to each other. Washing our hands so that when we would touch, it would ultimately be a touch of life, ultimately a touch of hope, ultimately a touch of newness. This year, we are called not only to a sacrificial form of love by self-denial, we are also called to a time of servanthood and washing our hands instead of each other's for the sake, almost as if we were washing each other's hands. But we are also called to be God's representatives. As he says, go and do likewise. So we are called to be God's representatives and witnesses by proclaiming through this tridium the hope we know that awaits us beyond the darkness of this night, and even the darkness that would envelop us on Friday as we would stand at the foot of the cross and watch in pain and agony the one who gives himself for us. That we would proclaim a message of hope. This Good Friday, this tridium, we are called to bow before each other in prayer, upholding each other so that we may not grow weak and weary, that we would be out there encouraging those on the front line by staying at home, practicing good hygiene, so that they would be able to serve those who need them most, even at great danger to themselves and their loved ones. We are called as disciples to point, despite our own fears and uncertainties, to the life that lies beyond the tomb of resurrection and new life. We are called to serve through acts of kindness by checking in on our neighbors, on the frail, in different and more meaningful ways. This Easter, under lockdown, we are called to ultimately, in a new way, remember Jesus and his great love for the world with the assurance that he is still present and offering us new hope, new life. So even as we go into the darkness of this night, we go in the hope that we go with Jesus, who will lead us to a glorious resurrection. May God bless you tonight.